Hello, 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 hello. How's everyone out there today? Hope everyone is doing well. This is Willie Cartwright with from Save to Sane. Just want to say hello and thank you for all of you who have joined me or who will listen to this at a later time and a later date. For those of you who are live, thank you for being there. Thank you for being here. Please send me a message in the chat. Let me know that you're out there. Um, and so, yeah, I'm just happy to be with you all today. And I'm thankful for everyone who is joining me and everyone who will listen to this. Whether they agree with everything that's said on this channel, this particular podcast, or not. I'm appreciative of those who care to engage, whether it be constructive or destructive. I'm just happy for the engagement because I think we all learn from this. So, those of you who have not been on this channel before, or who may be hearing this at a later time for the first time, I'm Willie Cartwright. The name of the channel is From Saved to Sane. From Saved to Sane. It is a copy or a ripoff of my book. I decided to name my podcast after my book here, From Saved to Sane. My journey away from Christianity and why Christianity has been detrimental to the African American community. If you want a good read, please pick it up. It is on Amazon. Please pick it up. Or if you want to get a signed copy from me, email me. Let me know in the chats. I'll put my email address in there. You can email me your information. I'll email you the Cash App, my Cash App information. 1999 Cash App, and I will get you a signed copy. Christine, thank you for joining us. Again, for those of you who have not been here before, I will always acknowledge those individuals who come into the chat. I will always speak to them and even engage in conversation with them doing the podcast. So this is very informal. If that's not your style, then I apologize for that, but it is my style, and so that's the way we have been conducting this for since we started, which I think is now it's been well over a year, maybe going into 2 years. I need to go back and take a look at the first podcast. I know I have I'm over 60 videos on my YouTube channel. So yeah, so this is good. Christina, what's going on? Hope you are well. What do I think that you? Where are you, Christine? You're not out west, are you? Are you on the East Coast? Let me know. But wanted to say hello to you and everyone else. But before I get started, as I always do, let me say thank you to two very important women in my life and around this podcast. One being Taisha Essick. Taisha, hope that you are doing well. I know you're out there somewhere, probably busy doing your thing, but always very appreciative to Taisha. She's as responsible as anybody getting me started on this platform into doing this. One of these days, we'll rehash our story of how we met or whatever. But thank you for everything that you've done and continue to do. And then, as always, my wonderful wife, who is extremely supportive of me. Thank you so much. My wife's her name is Salima Cartwright. So thank you for that as well. Oh, you're in Houston, Texas. Okay. Houston. Okay. Houston. I've never been to Houston. Um, my sister almost moved to Houston, but she didn't. But never been to Houston. Yeah, I'm just inquiring with some people. I know Sharon. I think Sharon lives in Arizona. So when she comes on, I need to ask her a couple of questions. But yeah, so thank you again, Christine. So today's topic, this is a part two of a topic that we had a while ago. It is the Indefensible Stories from the Bible, part two, is what I titled this podcast. And as always, I like to kind of set the foundation, the groundwork as to where I got this topic from. Jay Jammin, glad to have you. Oh, Jay Jammin is also in Houston. Okay, thank you, Houston. I appreciate that. Hope all is well, Jay Jammin. Um, so yeah, I like to set the foundation as to where I get these topics from, even though we've done this topic or a variation of it in the past, I wanted to do sort of a part two because there are a number of stories that we didn't get to. But there is always a rhyme and reason behind why I do these. So, first of all, how did this come to mind? Well, I was in class. Those of you know, I am a religious studies major, working on my master's degree. Actually, be finishing up in about 6 weeks. The end of, actually the end of April, we should be finishing up, and I'll be graduating in May with a master's MA in religious studies. And so I was having a conversation with one of my professors. Actually, I was her TA, and I'm sitting in the class with a lot of undergrads, and she's teaching them about the Abrahamic faiths. And so she's talking about Abraham, and in the conversation, those of you who know the Bible, you know the story of Abraham and Isaac and Ishmael and Sarah and uh, Hagar. I think it's Hagar. So she being the professor, proceeds to tell the students the story. Mind you, this is in Atlanta, Georgia, and a lot of these students had not heard the story or was not aware of the story. So she proceeds to tell the story about how Abraham and Sarah, or she pronounced the name correctly, more so than I can, the way it's supposed to be pronounced from a Hebrew standpoint. But anyway, as we know, us lay people, Abraham and Sarah could not conceive, or Sarah could not bear a child for Abraham, so she uh, um, enlisted the services of her slave Hagar, and told Hagar to, or instructed Hagar to sleep with Abraham, how the story goes, so that she could have a child, so that Abraham could have a child. And it needed to be a boy, obviously, firstborn, lineage is through the mill, the whole 9 yards. Thank you, Christina. And so Abraham and Hagar gets together, and Hagar has this child. The child is Ishmael. Either right after or almost at the same time, or right after this, whatever, and that is unclear to me. Sarah gets pregnant, even though she couldn't. All of a sudden, she gets pregnant, and so her child is Isaac. And so, as the story goes, if you are, and this is where we have this divide of the split in the Abrahamic faiths. For those of you who don't know, this is where we get the Muslim branch and the Christian branch. Those individuals who believe that they are part of the lineage, the biblical lineage of Ishmael, they are Islamic or Muslim. Those of us when I was a Christian, from a Christian standpoint, believe they're part of our lineage, or we're from the lineage of Isaac. Um, then we are Christians. So that's where the split is for people, the sort of biblical, historical, biblical history information. So she tells the story of Abraham and him sacrificing. In this case, we're going to say Isaac, sacrificing Isaac. So he takes Isaac up on the mound, and Isaac is like, he's telling Isaac, yeah, we have to do this sacrifice to God because God wants to sacrifice. And Isaac is like, okay, cool, but where is the sacrificial whatever? Um, Abraham said, don't worry, when we get there, God will make a way. It'll be there. They continue to walk. Isaac is still like, I don't see anything to be sacrificed. They get to the top. You guys know the story. Abraham ties up Isaac, lays him across the altar, and proceeds to sacrifice him by killing him. And just as he's about to kill him, he hears a voice from God that says, "No, don't do it." And then there's a lamb, as now people, a lamb in the woods or whatever, a lamb that takes the place of Isaac in the sacrifice. And so all the times I've heard the story, even as a child, well, early on, I just heard the story, it sounded weird to me, but I never questioned it. As I became an adult, I sort of like, really, something's not right about that. And then once I left Christianity, denounced the faith, I really began to ask questions about this particular story. Because this is, again, a foundational piece to the faith and to the religion, not only of Christianity, but also of Islam. But anyway, so the comment that I made, and me and so there's one of my cohorts. She is a devout Christian. She's from West Africa. She is a devout Christian, um, and she has a lot of issues with some of the stuff that is how things are taught in the school of religion at the school that we attend. But she's a devout Christian. Her and I kind of go back and forth. I just want to make fun of her in these stories, but this particular day, we engaged in a conversation, and I said to her, she like many other Christian apologists, when they hear this story, will say that this was a test, um, and that Jesus, I mean, that God was always going to not allow Abraham to kill Isaac, right? So the question I asked her was this: A, did Abraham know that this was a test? Certainly, Isaac did not know this was a test. And why would God do this, right? If this is an all knowing, all powerful God who knows the results, why would he play these games? Their response, so my professor, she also responded in that she thought that maybe there's a chance that Abraham knew that this was just a test. So here's the thing. We don't know this. I don't know, and I'm not a Bible expert. I'm not a Bible scholar. Obviously I know enough about the Bible to have these conversations, but I'm not a Bible scholar. So any of you out there, if you can tell me that A for sure and where it's written, or in the interpretation, that Abraham knew that this was a test from God. But also, what about Isaac or Ishmael, depending on where you fall? This is a child who certainly did not know this was a test by all the reactions and all the comments in the scriptures of the story. He certainly did not know this was a test. And so, what about the trauma that this child has endured? Why was this even necessary? So that takes us into today's topic, like these crazy, indefensible stories. There is nothing about this story that makes sense. There is nothing about this story that is rational, logical, or humane. This is an inhumane act by God, um, especially if Abraham did not know. But even if Abraham knew, we know for certain that Isaac or Ishmael did not know. So this is inhumane. This is unnecessary. And to what point was to be proven? God's supposed to know the level of our faith for those of you who are believers, and so there should be no need for a test. And so this is one of those wild stories. Christine said absolutely not a test that either was aware. My understanding, and in my 40 plus years of being a Christian, hearing this story countless times, nowhere from anyone, any pastor in the many churches that I've attended in multiple states and been a part of several different denominations, have I ever heard that Abraham was aware. And I've certainly have never heard that Isaac was aware. So this is one of these stories that is just completely off the charts, crazy, indefensible. And so that's where the idea came about to, well, let's do a part two. And so now, before we get into more of the stories, JJ Evans says, sorry for the typo. The light change made it destination. Oh, I got it. Houston. I figured that you saying it was Houston. I appreciate it. But yeah, but so before we get into the stories, the new stories that we'll talk about, some of them anyway. Uh, I wanted again just to be clear as to why we do this, because when I do this, I always get comments after the show is over from people who don't come on but make comments afterwards. And it's always something that either I'm attacking Christianity, why are you not doing this to Islam or Judaism or whatever, or you're taking stuff out of context, so forth and so on. It's always the same old, the same old. So just to be clear, the reason why we do this, the reason why I do this, the reason why we do this on this channel is for multiple reasons. First of all, we want to make people aware that if they have not been aware before, we want to make people aware that uh, where's the logic in some of these stories, right? uh, clearly we have this channel to create a space or to create a safe space for individuals like myself, in the past who had questions and was part of a journey and needed to be around other people who were not afraid to ask these questions and maybe get answers for these questions. We also want to try to point out to not just the believer, but those who, again, who are questioning their faith, that it is all right to question your faith because a lot of these stories in the Bible are illogical, make no sense whatsoever. And so you have to ask yourself, why am I following this a God who is condoning, condemning, allowing, and in many cases committing a lot of these atrocities that these stories are centered around? Why are these stories in the Bible? What is the purpose that they're serving? And for those individuals that come on or will sort of come in and say, well, these are um, analogies or metaphorical. The question that I always ask when I get that is, which stories are metaphorical, which stories are analogies, and where do we stop? And so Christians, believers, they get afraid of that question because they know where I'm going. If you say if we tell a story and that story is so outlandish, till you even as a believer sound like an idiot believing it and rehashing it, then we're gonna start pulling the layers back of the onion and say, okay, if story A is metaphorical or an analogy, then what about story B? What about story C? And eventually we're going to get to the stories that make up the very foundation of the faith. And so at some point we're going to ask, well, if a man being in the stomach of a whale or a big fish for 3 days, if that's a metaphorical story, what about Adam and Eve story? What about Adam and Eve eating the apple? Is that metaphoric? Is that an analogy? And if so, then are you telling me that none of that stuff really happened? That there's no creation story, that God didn't create Adam and Eve and the whole 9 yards? And so now you get into, well, what about the original sin? The reason why Jesus had to come back, for those of you who believe it, who are believers, is because of what Adam and Eve did in the Garden of Eden. So if that story is metaphorical and not real, which most of us know it is not real. But let's just say, for argument's sake, if that story is not real, then there would have been no need, no reason for Jesus to die on the cross and be resurrected and come back, because then there's no original sin. And so that's why we do this, because we want you all, those of you out there, we want you to, at a minimum, to understand why you believe what you believe. We also want you to be able to ask questions to whoever you go to for biblical advice and listening to their interpretation of the scriptures or whatever. We want you to be able to go to these people and say, okay, listen, I will listen to this guy on his podcast, and he's a former Christian, he's a religious studies guy, he's written a book, he's a religious studies major, he's written a book. And he says dot 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 dot, right? And it makes some kind of sense to me. How can you explain it to me? And that's what we're asking, and that's what I did before I left the faith. I said, hey, I don't understand this. I'm a Christian, but this doesn't make sense to me. Can you explain this to me? And I can tell you, most of the stories, 9 times out of 10, I went to people who had been in the faith for a long period of time, who were stalwarts of the faith, who were ministers, who were Sunday school teachers, who had been to school, who had been to divinity school, seminary school, even a secular education in religion, all of the above. And most of them could not tell me or give me a good answer to the questions that I was asking. And so that's why we're here. Christine said, Christianity is not about questioning anything, but just accepting everything the Bible teaches. Not me, I question everything and then follow the logic. Absolutely. if you don't get anything from this podcast when you come on every other Thursday, uh, always understand, question everything. Question, I don't care what it is, question everything. Because generally speaking, black people, we do question everything except the Bible. We want receipts for everything except the Bible. So yeah. Mo Wheat, what's going on, Mo? And what happened is so Mo's comment is, what happened about the resurrection? What if that was a metaphor or the entire story of Jesus? Well, Mo, I totally agree. There are people, if you talk to people who consider themselves spiritual, they will say that that Jesus' resurrection, the resurrection of the Son, S-O-N, is a metaphor for the resurrection or the rising of the S-U-N. Um, and if you follow that trail, a lot of times it makes some sense if you talk to someone who really goes into the whole details about it. So there are people out there who believe that the resurrection of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, S-O-N, is metaphoric to the rising of the Son, S-U-N. So absolutely, there are people out there who do believe that. And so that's why we do this. That's why we have this program. Again, I get questions all the time. Um, uh, and I think I mentioned this last time I was on, or maybe I didn't. We've always asked, if you don't believe, then what's the big deal? Why do you always making comments or going on the podcast or making comments on social media about it? Recently, those of you who know the story, Alabama passed a law that says that an embryo is a child, is a human being, and that if you do IVF and it doesn't take, then you can literally be responsible for quote unquote killing a child. And there are some legal ramifications for that. That's I sort of paraphrased the whole thing, but those of you who are aware of the case, that was a case in the state of Alabama. And so, if you read further, the lawmakers in Alabama specifically said this law that they passed in the state of Alabama came about because of their religious beliefs. So, as we talked about in my class the other day, even as a non believer, I have to engage in these. We have to engage, at least be aware of what's going on, in particular, especially in this country, because laws are being passed, regulations, norms that we all have to abide by. We all have to abide by, regardless of our religious belief. Um, and these, many of these laws and rules and norms and regulations, whatever, are being passed and are in place because of someone's religious belief, of someone's interpretation of their faith. And so, because this person or this group of people interpreted something from their religious text to mean this, we all have to follow those rules and those laws that are put in place, regardless of what we believe. So religion affects all of us, whether we believe or not believe, whatever we believe in or don't believe in. As long as we're in this country, and there are countries who are absolutely worse about this, but dealing with this country, those laws affect all of us, whether we are believers or not, or even if we're believers, even if we believe in something else or practice a different type of faith. We have to go along with the laws that are created by those who are in quote unquote the majority faith, or what this country believes to be the majority faith of Christianity. And so, without further ado, I want to get into one of the stories. And so I took this information from, and I like to give credit as a researcher and a student. I've learned the importance of giving credit to where credit is due. This is from Bro Bible. Neil Bosom, Bulson, updated November 11th, 2022. And these are just some of the weirdest and most messed up stories in the Bible. So this is created from him. Some of these have scriptures or citations to where you can find the stories in the Bible, and some don't. Some of you may have heard about some of these. we've talked about the book of Job, but I want to come back to the book of Job because that's one of my favorites. Uh, the story of Job. So I want to come back to that one. But we heard, I think I've talked in nauseum about the story of Elijah, the bald man who was mocked by the kids, and he cursed the kids in the name of God. And God sent two she bears or two bears to kill 42 kids. They were kids, calling him bald. Um, and I mean, just on a related subject, you think about how ridiculous that story is. That okay, here I am, an older man, a mature man, bald. I'm bald myself, but kids, being kids, call you bald, and so now you have the power to curse them, and God follows along and sends two bears to kill 42 kids. When I think about that, my niece, I have a 25-year-old niece who I love dearly. She lovingly calls me Baldy when she's when I said something because I'm and we I mean we're like kids when we get around each other, and we she send me jokes on she texts me jokes, and we go back and forth, and she loves being around me because I make her laugh all the time. So she lovingly calls me Baldy. And when I think about this story, and I'm saying to myself, think about how ridiculous this story is. If I got mad at my niece because she called me Baldy, and I cursed her in the name of God, and God sent a pack of wild animals to kill my niece. How ridiculous would that be? And so these are the things. I know people say, well, you took it all out of context, whatever. For those of you who come on and hear this now or later, and you say your first response is, I took this out of context. Give me the context that this makes sense in. Give me the context, the scriptural context that makes this uh, not such a ridiculous story. Um, but yeah, so we talk. So I've talked about that in nauseum, as I said before. Um, we talked about the plagues of Egypt, but I wanted to get to this one. He talked about David buys a wife with foreskin. So sort of the sort of paraphrase the story. King Saul, who was not a fan of David, um, David asked King Saul if he could marry his wife. I mean, his daughter. If he could marry his daughter. King Saul said, "Yeah, but in order to do that, you have to go out and you have to get me 100 foreskins of our enemies, the Philistines." Right? David goes out, and not only does he get 100 foreskins, and this is an adult program, so we know what foreskins are of the Philistines, but he brings back 200 foreskins. So he either kills 200 men and cuts off their foreskin on their penis, or he tortures them and cuts off their foreskin while they're still alive. Whatever. That is the story, and so he brings the foreskin back, and I think the rest is, I think he ends up marrying Saul's daughter. But this is a story in the Bible, a ridiculous story in the Bible that makes absolutely no sense. Again, those apologists out there, those of you who are Bible experts who've studied the Bible, who understand Hebrew and Arabic, and even Latin or Greek or whatever the third language is, let me know how we are taking this out of context, because that sounds like a very gruesome story. Um, he also talks about God orders genocide and rewards his followers with virgin slaves. I use this story a lot when I'm discussing things with believers, because this is not just a one-off. This happens multiple times in the Bible. Basically, what happens is that after leaving Egypt, the Egyptians, God and Moses get together, and they decide. This is in Numbers 31. Moses and God decide to open up. To get into a confrontation with the people of Midian, Midian, as the Israelites were ordered to not only kill every man and male child. Now, this is God and Moses now. Um, the Israelites have killed every male grown man and male child they could find, but also any woman who had ever known someone, and in the Bible, known KNOWN quotations. Yeah, quotations around it means to have sex with or lay with, to be with. So to kill every woman who had ever known someone in the biblical sense, that means sleeping with. Uh, After butchering thousands of men, women, and children, they then stole all of their goods. And just to put a nice cherry on top, they rounded up all of the virgin girls and gave them to the Israelite men as slaves. God allowed this. God condoned this. This is part of God's instructions. So you go out, you kill all the men, all of the male kids, all of the women who've been with men, and you keep the virgins as a reward for yourself as Israelites, God's chosen people, so to speak. Supposedly, these are God's chosen people. So let me pause there for a minute. Christine said, make it make sense. Before that, she said, teach truth, justice, and corrections every day. Interpersonal wisdom. Don't talk nonsensical things. If he does, it proves the lack of knowledge and wisdom. Absolutely, 100% agree. So now let's break this down. So now, why is this a problem? Because we have to make this practical. We have to make this applicable uh, to what's going on today. Uh, Many of our people, 2/3 of the world, I think, at the last count, live and die by what's in the Bible. Our entire life is through the prism of our interpretation of biblical scriptures. Our entire life is centered around the belief in this God of the Bible, and for Christians, Jesus in the New Testament, but still God overall, Old Testament and New Testament. But yet, we read about stories like this, we hear about stories like this, and we either ignore them, um, cherry pick around them, or whatever reason. These stories don't bother us. So does it not bother you, believers, that you are following and you are worshiping and you are hoping to spend eternity with a psychopath? If the description of God as it is in the Bible is correct, then your God is a psychopath. He is inhumane. He is a genocidal psychopath. He is a rapist. He is a person, he is a murderer, not only of adults, but kids. And I know I'm going to get pushback from people, but if you come with pushback, tell me where I'm wrong. Just don't tell me, well, you don't understand, or in your cardinal self, you don't understand, or he's God. I hear this is the one I hear all the time. He's God, he can do anything. Or I hear this. He created us, so he can do anything to us. Because my wife and I make a child, doesn't give me the right to kill that child. um, that I don't never understood that logic. So instead of addressing the issue, instead of addressing the fact that you are worshiping and wanting to spend eternity with this maniac, you make excuses for it, whatever, right? And so I never understood that. So we'll come back to that. Those of you who have comments, please put comments in the chat. Let me know if I'm wrong, where I'm wrong about, where I'm going off. If you have a particular favorite story of your own, uh, put it in the chat and we will discuss it. Absolutely. Christine said, make it make sense. And then psychopathic killer. Absolutely. Here's another one. Jephthah, Jephthaa, kills his daughter. And I remember this story too as a young person, as a person in the church. A story. This person goes out to war. Jephthah is headed off to battle, and in order to earn God's favor, the things that we have to do, things that people in the Bible and that we do today to earn this God's favor, this God who is owner of everything, creator of all, supposedly, we have to do things to earn his its favor. To earn his favor, he vowed that whoever emerges and comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the people of Ammon shall surely be God's, and I shall sacrifice them as a burnt offering. Those of you who know the story, you know what happens. He gets back home, and the first person that greets him is his daughter. The first person he sees, the first person that comes out the door is his daughter. So he has to sacrifice her and kill her as a burnt offering to God. There's a theme in these stories. Most often, women in these stories are and throughout the Bible are treated as property, are treated as throwaways, are treated as nothing. Again, when we talk and nothing, nothing points this out more so than two particular stories, which both of these stories were kind of part of each other, sort of combine each other. So think about the whole Sodom and Gomorrah deal. Before we get to um, the wife being turned to salt, if you remember how the story begins, angels come and visit Lot, right? And men from the town come to Lot's house and they want to rape the angels. This is a story. Look it up. It's Sodom and Gomorrah. This is how the story begins. Lot says, "No, these male angels are guests of mine, and you can't rape them. But here are my daughters who've never known KNOWN, as we say in the Bible, means slept with, been with, had sex with. Here are my daughters who have never known a man. You can have them and do what you will with them." So again, this is degrading women, uh, treating women as property, and this is throughout the Bible. And so this story goes on. For whatever reason, God becomes unhappy with Sodom and Gomorrah. People always tell you that it's really about homosexuality when actually it's not. There's a whole other lot of stuff going on in this city, Sodom and Gomorrah. So it's really not about homosexuality as to why God is mad at this city. But anyway, God decides to destroy the city. Tells Lot, take your family, leave the city, because I'm going to destroy the city. Now, he's telling Lot this. He's going to save Lot. Lot is the same man who just offered his daughters up to be raped by strangers. But for whatever reason, God felt that this man was worth saving, right? Okay. Wife got nothing to do with this. She's probably back in the back room somewhere chilling. But here they are running, leaving the city. And of all the people, the wife turns around, looks back at the city that she loves so much and she's losing so much, in the city that she probably grew up in and all she's ever known. She did what most people would naturally do, turn around and look back at the destruction that this God has caused on this city. And all of the innocent people in this city, because I'm sure that everybody was not doing bad or evil. Certainly, if you can save a man who offered his daughters up to be raped, I'm certainly there are other people in the city that did nothing nowhere near as bad as what Lot did. But anyway, destroys the entire city. She looks back and is turned into a pillar of salt. Again, a woman being treated this kind of way, this type of way in the Bible. It is often interesting to me, especially now that I'm on the other side, how African Americans and women can be Christians if you read the Bible. It is amazing to me how women and African Americans can call themselves or were willing to call themselves Christians. People, even Africans as well. So that it is amazing to me. a couple of comments from Mo. Where Christina first said, "What the hell?" Yeah, actually, right. What the hell? Um, the story that's similar to Sodom and Gomorrah. Strangers show up. The townspeople demand that they send them out, but this time they send out the stranger's mistress, and they know her to death. See, there you go. Right, right, right. Kenow. Yeah, now Kenow. In the present since they, I mean, they're in the actual the action. I guess it's now becomes an action verb because they are knowing her to death. Wow, it's just incredible. Yet we don't question these stories. Mo also says he did cuss up all her parts. Yeah, I remember the story. Yeah, cuss up all her parts and then send them to each tribe. They all get together and attack the tribe that did this. And then Mo finally says they wind up leaving 400 or so of the tribe being alive. Give them wives from another tribe. I can't remember what the scripture is. Yeah, I can't remember what the scripture is either, but I do know the story. And so again, these these stories that are just off that are just atrocities and just totally mistreatment of women and other people in the stories. And these are and keep in mind, people, um, all of these acts are, if you read back further, all of these acts are either condoned, um, uh, committed, condoned, or rewarded by some way by God. And even if people argue that story B, God didn't condone or commit or reward, I never see where God punished the people for doing these things. I never see that. I never see where God punished this person for raping these Israelites for raping the virgins or doing this. I never see that. I never see that. So even so, condoning in some cases is the fact that there is no ramifications from God for these acts that today we would say this person needs to be punished for. But apparently, raping a virgin, it was not a crime in the biblical times, right? Especially if God was behind it and condoned it. Christine said, please smash the like button. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Please do that. Mo said, you know what? Maybe it did say, so we may know her. So we may know. We have to look that up. But there are plenty of stories where the women are raped, taken advantage of. Um, so forth and so on in that. And so I wanted to go back up, and I know we've covered this before, but I wanted comments and I wanted to just talk about how ridiculous the story of Job is. It is one of the stories that just bothers me so much. Um, uh, and I've said things about scriptures in the Bible that may have been extreme for people when I just kind of lay it on the line. Like for example, when we talk about Mary, the Virgin Mary, again, here we go again, the Virgin Mary being bearing Jesus, and she is between the ages of 12 and 14, and she is either the girlfriend or the fiance of Joseph. Uh, I got into a discussion this week with one of my professors, and I said that my understanding, what I've always heard, was that God sent the Holy Ghost to impregnate Mary, and she says that she's never heard it put like that. I've also said that basically God raped Mary because if you know the story, you go further down in the story. Mary wasn't necessarily asked before. It was kind of told to her, this is what's going to happen. You're going to bear the child you're going to bear God's son. So now think about this. You're a 12 to 14-year-old young girl. You are, you are extremely devout. Um, God and Christianity, well, it's not even Christianity at this point because Jesus is not even born. But your faith and your belief in God is your everything. It is everything to these people back then. It is everything. So now this God, or you believe this God is telling you that you are going to bear his son. You don't, how do you say no? You can't say no. You wasn't asked. So in my opinion, that's rape, right? And so my professor said that she's never heard the way I phrased it, or what was told to me was that God sent the Holy Spirit to impregnate Mary. But anyway, so that's one of the extreme things that I say. And so I was saying that to say about the story of Job. I start off when I tell the story to people, we get into a discussion. I said, basically, this is a bet between God and the devil. A bet, a street bet, a bet between two fools on the street. Because I'm familiar with these type bets because I used to make these type bets on the street just on a whim, right? And so God and the devil's like, yeah, God, you got this dude, man. This dude is devout to you. Um, but I don't know. I think I can maybe sway him. God says, nah, nah. Job is one of my favorite people. That's my dude. He'll never leave me. He'll never leave me. Devil said, you sure about that? God said, yeah. As a matter of fact, let's make a bet. I tell you. He said, but here's the parameters of the bet. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna let you do everything you want to do to Job, except kill him. You could take everything he ever loved, everything he owned. You could even inflict him with disease or whatever. And I promise you, he'll be faithful to me. So the devil said, bet, gotcha. So the devil goes off, takes his livestock, because this at that back then, your wealth was based on your livestock. So he owned cattle and sheep and whatever. God allows the devil to kill or have all those things die. All his livestock is dead. Then his kids. God, yeah, devil, you can take his kids. Now wait a minute. These are it's bad enough that you are punishing the animals, right? The animals didn't do anything. They just living. But you, as part of God's bet with the devil, they take the lives of innocent people as part of this juvenile bet. So now the devil is able to kill Job's kids. The wife, who is wise, says, Job, you're a fool. You need to curse God, die, just leave. This ain't this. What kind of God is this? So then Job gets sick. I think it's part of the story. He gets sick as well, or whatever. But Job, to his name, to his credit, does not leave God. And so ask yourself, what's the reason behind this? What's the purpose of this? If God being God already knew that Job was never going to leave him, why would God allow the devil to take everything that Job has, his livestock, his cattle, and kill his kids? So I think I've told y'all this before. I've had people when we talk about this story. Christine said battle of egos. Absolutely. But I've had people in the story who say, when they hear the story, and this is, I mean, people, like human beings like us today, like people look like you and I, will say to me about this story, well, at the end of the day, God replaced him because he ended up having more kids and so forth and so on. I said, now listen, I don't have any kids, but I do have a niece and a nephew that I love dearly, and I have a sister. Um, and those three people are not replaceable to me. They're not like a piece of furniture that you can just swap out. Um, if something happened to my sister, my niece, my nephew, I would surely miss them. If something happened to my niece and nephew, I would certainly miss them. Even if my sister was able to have other kids, I would miss my niece and nephew. They're not replaceable. So I'm assuming those of you who have kids, that your children are not replaceable. And so I do. That's an explanation on the fence that I hear sometime from people about this story of Job. Curtis, is that Curtis Cadet? Yeah, I think I can see. Curtis, what's going on? Glad to have you here. So yeah, so again, these stories. That we talk about, these stories in the Bible. I didn't just want to come on here today just to talk about these stories for the sake of talking about these stories, but I wanted to use these stories to try to point out how ridiculous a lot of the things in the Bible are. And why is that important is because we need to take a look at the Bible, and we need to ask ourselves, why are we believing this? Simply because our parents, our mother, our grandparents believe this story. Well, let's go back even further. Um, why are we believing this stuff? I know it's hard to break away because two-thirds of this world believes in this Abrahamic God and the stories from the Bible and the Quran. And as we say in academia, the Old Testament, which is really the Hebrew Bible, the New Testament, and the Quran. Um, we know people believe in that, all of this. But we have to go beyond that. At some point, as a society, especially in this country, we need to wake up and ask the critical questions. There are many atrocities in the Bible. There are many things that don't make sense there. We're worshiping a God who, by many counts in the Bible, uh, there are um, psychopathic tendencies, atrocities that are again condoned, committed, or rewarded by this God. And so, why are we following a person or an entity like this? And why do we want to spend eternity with an entity like this? Mo Wheat says, Judge 119. So the Lord was with Judah, and they drove out the mountaineers, but they could not drive out the inhabitants of the lowland because they had chariots of iron. um, Curtis says, "Thank you, glad to be here. Thank you, Curtis, for having Curtis. My name is Curtis. Okay, I got that right, Curtis. I need someone to help, please. All powerful God can't handle iron chariots. Oh yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you know what? I came across that story. Uh, I came across that story not too long ago, and I'd heard it before, Mo. But I can't remember what was the impetus for the story. But I had heard the story. I don't know when the conversation came out. But yeah, absolutely. Apparently, God cannot handle chariots of iron. Curtis, what can we help you with? What's the issue? Hopefully, we can help you. We got about 7 more minutes, so let us know how we can help you, Curtis, because that's what we're here for. But anyway, so yeah, so if we take our time and we go through the Bible and pull up these stories, and again, I don't know why I need to say this, but these are just not stories in the Old Testament. There are stories in the New Testament as well. Again, another defense that a lot of apologists will have is that um, they are they like to say that we're under a new covenant and that we're in the New Testament. Um, he said, I am homeless here in Jacksonville, Florida. Curtis, I don't know if we have anybody here from Jacksonville. I would just encourage you to, I'm sure there are services that you may be able to turn to, the local services there in Jacksonville. It's not much, at least let me speak for myself. There isn't much that I can do from my end here to help. Uh, you need some few dollars to feed your family. It's nothing I can do here, Curtis. From that, but I would encourage you to look around locally in your place there in Jacksonville. That so back to what I was saying. Yeah, so I encourage all of us to take a look at these scriptures and the things that we believe, that we were made to believe, and that we kind of grew up understanding, and ask yourself questions as to why we believe what we believe. I just use these stories this time and when we did this before as an example of a lot of things that normal people don't make sense. And if they don't make sense, then we really need to be asking questions. And so if they're not, thank you, Curtis. Hopefully you find the help that you need, sir. Um, if there are not any more questions or comments for us to address, we're going to end a few minutes early. Um, but yeah, those of you enjoyed having you on. Appreciate all of you here. I am looking forward to the comments that I'm going to get after the show is over. But I appreciate everyone. Stay safe. Eat, text, put some comments in here, and I'll see them as I go back and reread over this. Comments as to what subjects you want to cover or you want me to cover, you want us to talk about here. But if there's not anything else, I appreciate all of you. Mo Wheat, again, Curtis, I hope you get the help that you need. Christine, appreciate it so much. And so everyone else out there who's listening but didn't comment and who will hit us at a later time, certainly appreciate it. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.